Welcome back to Transfer Review. I know we lied last week. We said it was the last one last week. Turns out the last one is this week, I think. Don't hold your breath, but I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, the transfer window is over, so I expect it is. Joining me today, as always, is Sam Basaki. And seeing as it is the end of the transfer window, we thought we'd have a look back at the summer and pinpoint three clubs who we think didn't do, had less than satisfactory windows, let's say. Obviously, the window's shut across Europe's top 5 leagues now. And so, yeah, we've got three to talk about today. One notable exception, a team that we're not talking about today, is Valencia. Obviously, they sold a number of key players at cut prices this summer, literally brought in no one. However, we have covered them a lot recently in quite some detail, so I don't think we were going to do them much justice today. But Sam, we're kicking off with the French champions.
Yeah, man, PSG. I don't think they'll be that excited about their transfer window. Obviously, since signing Mauro Icardi for 50 million euros at the end of May, they haven't really been as active as they probably would have wanted to be after obviously losing that Champions League final to Bayern Munich. They did actually make one permanent move, but that was obviously Sergio, who was player that was on loan in the 1920 season. And once again, they've said goodbye to a few young G's. They said bye to Adil Aouchiche. I think I've said that all right. And he's going to Saint Etienne on a free, and Tanguy Kouassi, who's gone to Bayern for free too. So obviously they won't be excited about that because they've lost a lot of young G's to a few competitors in the Champions League and in the French league. Other players they've said goodbye to, obviously their captain, happy about that one, Thiago Silva's come to Chelsea, Edinson Cavani's gone to Manchester United, Thomas Meunier gone to Dortmund, and Eric Choupo-Moting has now gone to Bayern Munich. So they've lost quite a few senior players. In their place, they got Moise Kean from Everton, Alessandro Florenzi and Danilo Pereira all on loan, as well as Rafinha from Barcelona for free. Not really exciting players, maybe players that you could predict that they will do well in the future, but we're not too sure about them. 3 of those 4 players were on deadline day, so you could kind of tell that the French champions didn't really have a plan, let's say, going into this transfer window. Obviously, a lot of it was quick from when they lost the Champions League to when they started the league, so you could kind of blame it on that if you're a PSG fan, but if you're an outsider, you might just think that they should have come into it with more of a plan. Aside from Florenzi, who's made 4 league appearances this season and scored 1 goal, all of the other players aren't seen to be as regular as you're less likely to see them. They'll probably be fighting for a start in the team, but not players that you say are gonna guarantee a place week in, week out. So a disappointing window, Mikey, man. I can't lie. What do you reckon?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, a lot of that business was done very late, and I think kind of probably under a little bit of pressure as well, because it was looking like a real car crash summer for them in terms of not really improving the squad at all. And like you say, they haven't really improved the first team at all. And it's had a pretty bad impact on the start of the season as well. Obviously, they lost their opening 2 games of the campaign. They had a lot of players out for kind of COVID-related reasons, didn't they, in those first 2 games? And they have won the 4 since then, but they do sit 4th in Ligue 1 now, so their rivals have had a head start. Juan Bernat is out till March with injury now. Levin Kurzawa is banned, so that's left 20-year-old Mitchell Bakker as their only fit left back. He had very minimal experience until this season, so that's a little bit of a worry for them. And last week, Thomas Tuchel went public with his frustration at the club's lack of activity. So to quote him, he said, "We do not have the same quality." I'm assuming he means as last season. If we stay like this with this reduced squad, we cannot expect to have the same objectives as last season. So pretty cutting stuff.
That's deep.
And sporting director Leonardo, took it pretty badly. So he explained the club's stance on holding back on spending in obviously these uncertain economic times, which I think has been the kind of club's policy. But he also suggested that Tuchel could be punished internally by the club as well. So this is a very public spat now.
No.
And they do have history. They have had a pretty difficult relationship at the club, especially in the last year. But Tuchel does have a right to be frustrated, I think. Despite the club's aim of saving money this summer, they haven't really brought any money in. Like you were saying, that they lost Aouchiche and Kouassi for free, and like you were saying in the past, they have also they have given up their kind of most promising young players for fairly cheap. But at least in the last couple of years, they did get fees for them. They didn't receive anything for Kouassi or Aouchiche. So that has to come down to bad, general bad management within the hierarchy. Apparently, L'Équipe at the start of September said that they wanted to make 60 million euros in transfer fees, so they haven't even made a tenth of that. Not great from either side of the spectrum in terms of saving money or buying quality players in. Tuchel also wanted to keep Thiago Silva, which was not what Leonardo wanted. I think Leonardo was pretty adamant that Thiago Silva was going to be allowed to leave all summer. And then apparently, after he'd agreed terms with Chelsea, Leonardo then had a change of heart and decided to offer for him to stay.
They tried to ramble around, didn't it? They tried to say they still want him to stay. Obviously, after the Champions League final, the display, the quality, the leadership, they realised what they were missing, but it was too late. It was too late.
And I mean, it's just poor. It's just poor organisation, isn't it, from one of the biggest clubs in the world. Thiago himself came out afterwards and said that the handling of that situation, specifically the handling of that situation by Leonardo, not only for him but of Cavani's exit as well, was clumsy. And I mean, I guess it's hard to disagree, because these are two huge players in the club's modern history, and we're both kind of allowed to go with fairly little fanfare, I think. But nevertheless, Tuchel looks like he's in trouble. There's speculation growing now that the German manager could be sacked before Christmas. Leonardo's thought to be an admirer of Max Allegri. I think that's been a fairly widely known thing for a while now. Obviously, Allegri's still out of work as well, and has been quoted as saying that kind of out of clubs outside of Serie A, PSG would probably be his favourite. But whatever happens to Tuchel, the next 12 months are huge for the club. It really could be make or break, I think, in terms of their ability to improve on last season, which obviously
this could be the end.
Were pretty high standards, weren't they? Draxler, Bernat and Di Maria, their contracts are all up next summer. Neymar and Mbappe's are obviously up in 2022. And if there's further unrest at the club, you do have to, there is going to start, the speculation is going to start growing, isn't it, about Neymar and especially Mbappe's future. Could be pretty worrying times for PSG in the next couple of months, depending on what happens with Tuchel. If they do falter at all in the next couple of months as well, because obviously they've got a pretty tough Champions League group, which they are the favourites in, but there are some potential stumbling blocks there. But let's move on to our next candidate, Sam. Real Madrid. Yeah,
like PSG, Real Madrid went into summer with an emphasis mainly on selling over than buying. Obviously, they had a racked up roster of players, a lot of older players, a lot of players that they've been trying to get rid of, like Bale. And I guess it makes sense that they ended the window with 0 signings, but it's still frustrating for a lot of the fans of Los Blancos. They've of course brought back Martin Ødegaard from his 2-year loan. Well, it was supposed to be 2-year loan spell, but they brought him back earlier. Instead, obviously, he had a great time over there, and he's already started 2 times this term. However, the squad is looking thin, Mikey. They've sold 9 players permanently this summer, including Hakimi, Sergio Reguilon, Oscar Rodriguez, James Rodriguez. And while the attacking midfield area needed some cutting, obviously with Martin Ødegaard coming back, they still now lack cover at fullback. Marcelo obviously is still there, but he's getting older. Dani Carvajal is now out until December with a knee ligament damage, and that leaves Alvaro Odriozola as the only right back, and he's obviously carrying a knock as well. So they're looking very thin, Mikey. I don't know what. Obviously, it made sense for what they were doing, but does it make sense now?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. A little bit like PSG. I think Real Madrid, they don't look much worse this season so far, but they definitely haven't improved that squad, have they? Which when you're trying to retain a title isn't ideal. For the second summer in a row, they've also failed to sign a backup for Casemiro. Obviously, they're big fans of Camavinga in France, aren't they? But he's going to command a big fee. They also wanted Pogba, didn't they, initially? And that, obviously, coronavirus meant that didn't happen in the end. According to Marca, Zidane favours Castilla midfielder Antonio Blanco. Apparently, he's a big fan of him in that defensive midfield role, but he's yet to feature in the squad this season. And then in the centre-forward area as well, they're still over-reliant on Benzema, who turns 33 in December. And of course, he has proven that age is just a number. But if anything happens to him, it's hard to see where the goals are going to come from. Luka Jovic, it's been good to see him play a little bit more recently, and I do have faith that he'll start to get amongst the goals. But at the moment, there's no evidence that he's going to do that. Hazard's fitness issues continue to be a problem as well. I don't think he's back until the end of the month.
So sad. So sad.
So yeah, and again, the kind of wide positions last term, there wasn't that much coming from them, and I know Vinicius has got 2 in his last 2. Hopefully he can kick on, but there is a lot of pressure on him to improve. Rodrigo as well, and Asensio, who's probably going to play a little bit more this season than we have seen in the last couple. I think essentially for me anyway, Real Madrid should have been bigger favourites for the title than they are. I think they are still favourites, but they're not as convincing as I probably would have thought at the start of the summer. As for the players they sold, very quickly touching on Hakimi, because I think it was a difficult one with him, because I think it was his future never really realistically looked like being at Madrid. I think from what we can infer from what his agent has said, Zidane and him maybe didn't see eye to eye. His agent said that Zidane is the reason for him leaving, and obviously he doesn't necessarily fit that system perfectly. He's more of a right wing back than a right back. Although I'd have faith that he could probably develop into a very good right back in the future. He's only 21 years old. I mean, he already has 2 assists and a goal in his first 3 games for Inter. And like we were saying, not the strongest defensively at the moment, but I have a lot of faith that would change in years to come. So all in all, a pretty disappointing summer for Real Madrid. We've got one shout at the end. We'll skim over this because we've gone into a decent amount of detail on the other 2 clubs, but Schalke in the Bundesliga, I mean, it's not been a great couple of years for them, has it? But this summer in particular has been woeful.
Yeah, man, it's been a miserable start for Schalke. Kieran, if you're watching, just turn away because you're not going to want to hear this. Obviously, this all started with that 8-0 loss to Bayern Munich on the opening day, which ultimately saw David Wagner sacked. And then after that, it didn't get much better. They lost 3-1 to Werder Bremen and then 4-0 to RB Leipzig. Not the easiest fixtures to start off with, but now they sit dead bottom of the league with minus 14 goal difference. Obviously, that is a little bit embarrassing for a team of Schalke's stature. And this awful form obviously comes from them not getting involved in the transfer window. They had a terrible transfer window. Obviously, the club were considered to be one of the most high risk of a collapse from the coronavirus crisis, with financial troubles just hitting them in recent years. They ended the 2019 financial year with £200 million in debt. So it was very unlikely that they were going to make any significant signings in the window. So like I said, there's no surprise that they're in this patch that they're in. Obviously, their squad looks much weaker. And to be fair, last season, it wasn't that much great. Well, the end of last season, it wasn't that much greater. They ended with no wins in their last 16 games. So, I don't know, it's not really looking bright for Schalke, Mikey.
No, not at all. And just to quickly go into kind of their outgoings and incomings in the summer. So obviously they lost goalkeeper Alexander Nubel, to Bayern Munich for free. That was a transfer that was I think complete a decent amount before the window actually. Weston McKennie obviously went to Juventus on loan, and Daniel Caligiuri also went for free to Augsburg. All 3 of those players were among the club's top 6 appearance makers last term. And then John Joe Kenny, who was also one of the surprise kind of star performers, especially towards the start of last season. He racked up the second most minutes in the squad. He's back at Everton. Hasn't played a minute for Everton so far this term. Their only permanent signing has been 36-year-old striker Verdad Ibisevic from Hertha Berlin. Sorry if I butchered that name. Considering they lost a lot of quality from that first team, this is pretty worrying. Because to downgrade from a side which ended the season in such bad form, you're kind of asking for it. The club have had big financial trouble, and maybe their hands were tied, but nevertheless, it's pretty worrying on the pitch for Schalke. Like I think they've got to be early favourites for that relegation battle, don't they? Because a number of star players are out as well. You know, of the ones who stayed, Amina Harit tested positive for COVID, I think last week. Suat Serdar has a hamstring injury, and Ozan Kabak is currently sitting out 5 games with a ban for, I think it was a red card and spitting, for which he was also fined a hefty amount as well. So he's not back until November. So yeah, not great at all for Schalke. Let us know what you think of the Schalke situation in the comments below, Bundesliga fans. But what do you guys reckon at home? Out of these 3 clubs, who do you think has had the worst transfer window? And if you've got any other shouts, let us know in the comments below. Obviously, I haven't covered Premier League teams today. Obviously, you know, the likes of United and West Ham had pretty bad ones as well, didn't they? But Sam, where should they go next?
They should go to the podcast channel. I keep on plugging the podcast channel because it's quality content. I feel like this week they did hot takes. Yes. I can't remember what the hot takes were about.
I think one was that Everton were going to finish top 4 and that Arsenal should have sold Aubameyang.
Yeah. So if you're into all of that stuff and want to hear what Pat has to say, and Joe and I think Hammer was on it as well, then yeah, go check out the podcast channel and hit subscribe, and also Snapchat as well. We're on Snapchat. I made a cheeky appearance last week. So if you're on Snapchat, then subscribe and swipe up and all of that stuff.
Sweet. Yeah, I think you've covered it all there, Sam. Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Like and subscribe as well, please.